Welcome back. The topic of this video is, what is philosophy? So for many of you, this is going to be your first exposure to philosophy, so we need to talk a little bit about what it is. And so we're going to start with the word itself, philosophy, what that means, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the nature of philosophy, and then we're going to talk about the academic discipline of philosophy, what professors like myself, who are professors of philosophy, what is it that we do? This is kind of like an orientation video. We're going to be going over a lot of really important terminology, though, so make sure you've printed out the study guide, and make sure you have that in front of you, because I'm going to be introducing you to a lot of words which may be foreign to you, but because they're based in Greek and Latin and this kind of stuff. So that's how we philosophers roll. So make sure you have that in front of you, and so you can fill it out as we go through this. So let's start with the word itself, philosophy, right? In fact, the first question on the midterm, and I think the final as well, probably the first question on the quiz is, what is the definition of philosophy? What does this word mean? Like, literally, what does the word philosophy mean? So here you go. Hopefully you have the study guide out in front of you. So what the word means is the word philosophy etymologically means love of wisdom. So etymology is a discipline that studies the linguistic and historical roots of words, right? And if you've ever been up at like 4 in the morning or whatever, and you can't sleep, and you like turn on the spelling bee on ESPN, huh? Yeah, people done that? Yeah, huh? No, just me. Anyway, so if you've done that, you'll know that if you've seen a spelling bee, sometimes people ask, they'll ask, what is the origin of this word? What they're asking about is the etymology. And so the person who's running the thing, I don't know what they're called. Of course I don't. I don't know everything there is to know about spelling bees. I don't. So I have no idea what they're called. The person who's, spelling will ask the person who's running it, the MC. They're not an MC, not a DJ. I don't know what they're called. They'll ask them, where does this word come from? And when they're doing that, they're asking about the etymology, and then the person will answer, it comes from, ancient Greek, it comes from Latin, it comes from Middle French. I don't know if that's a thing. We'll just pretend that's a thing. They'll tell them where it comes from. And so that's what we're doing here with philosophy. The word philosophy, where does it come from? Etymologically, historically, linguistically, where does it come from? Well, the word itself is from ancient Greek. And it is a composite of 2 ancient Greek words. One is philia, P-H-I-L-I-A, philia. And the other is Sophia, S-O-P-H-I-A, Sophia. So philia and Sophia. Philia means love, and Sophia means wisdom. So you put those 2 together, and what do you get? You get love of wisdom, right? That's the idea. So interestingly, we're going to talk a little bit about the word itself. You're like, I didn't know we could talk so much about words. Yeah, well, welcome to philosophy. All right, anyway. So many of you probably didn't know this, but ancient Greek actually had 4 words for love. 4, right? English only has the 1 word for love, which creates all sorts of ambiguities, right, ladies? Like when your best guy friend asks you out on a date, and you're like, I love you, John, but I don't love you like that. Yeah, because we only have that 1 English word for love. If you knew Greek, you would be able to say, I philia love you, John, I don't eros love you. And then John would be like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't speak Greek. Anyway, no, but I actually think it is helpful to be able to make these kinds of distinctions. And I think it kind of stinks that we don't make these kinds of distinctions in English, because we just have that 1 word for love. But in Greek, you actually have 4 words for love. You have philia, which does mean love. They all mean love. That's the idea. But it's a particular kind of love. So philia means friendship love. Then there's also storge, which is affection, kind of like a warm, fuzzy feeling that you have for somebody you've known a really long time. Then there's also eros, which is romantic love. You might actually be familiar with that one because there are English cognates like erotic, but that's romantic love, eros. And then there's agape, which if you have gone to like Sunday school, you may recognize that is the love of God, basically. We're going to kind of leave it there with the 4 loves. It's something a topic I'm deeply interested in, though. So if you are also interested in that, then take my philosophy of love class, which I am now teaching at Holy Family, which is awesome. So it is an elective at this point, though. But you're welcome to take it. I think it's like the coolest class ever, because all we do is talk about love and relationships and sex. So yeah, say no more. Anyway, if you're interested in that, you take that class and we talk all about the different kinds of love. But philia, right? Love. That word philia is also the root of another word that you're probably familiar with. Philia. What other word might you know it sounds like philia? Philadelphia, right? Philadelphia is known as the city of what? City of brotherly love. And it's known as the city of brotherly love because we're just so gosh darn nice to one another. No, Philadelphia is the most aggressive city on the face of the earth, and I love it. It's great. But is known as the city of brotherly love not because we're nice to one another. It's because it's what the word means. Philadelphia is also from ancient Greek. Like philosophy is a composite of 2 ancient Greek terms, but in this case, it's a composite of philia and adelphos, which means brother, right? So philia, love, adelphos, brother, city of brotherly love. See what they did there? Yeah, that's whatever. That's how that works. Anyway, that's probably like the one thing from this course that you're going to remember like 30 years from now. You're going to be like, whatever, 50, and somebody's going to ask you like, you took a philosophy class in college? And you're like, yeah, I did. Like, what'd you learn? You'll be like, I know why Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. And on that day, you will think of me. I'll be dead in the gutter somewhere, but that's I'll be lucky if I make it through the rest of the semester. I eat frozen pizza every day. Anyway, it's not important right now. What is important? What are we talking about? Okay, what is important is philosophy, right? Philosophy means love of wisdom, and it means love of wisdom because that's what that's what the Greek means, right? So philosophers are lovers of wisdom. That's what we do. So we talked a little bit about the first half of the word, a little bit, right? Philia, love. It's actually a particular kind of love. It's more like friendship love, but we're gonna leave that aside. So love of wisdom. But let's talk a little bit about the second half of the word. So I said that the philosophy is a composite of 2 Greek words, philia on the one hand and Sophia on the other. Sophia does mean wisdom. Some of you may know people who are named Sophie or Sophia or Saphia. Those are all just variants of the Greek word for wisdom. So philosophy is about the love of wisdom. I think it's interesting and telling that it is the love of wisdom and not the love of knowledge. So in Greek, just like in English, there is a distinction between wisdom and knowledge. So in Greek, they have Sophia, which is wisdom, and then they have episteme, and that's spelled E-P-I-S-T-E-M-E, episteme. It's the root of the philosophical term epistemology, which we're going to be turning to in just a few minutes. So you will see it again. You can see it on the study guide, epistemology. But so they have, just like in English, we have wisdom and knowledge. The Greeks had, they had Sophia and they had episteme. So if this were a synchronous class, if we were all in a room together right now, I would ask you, what do you think is the difference? How would you characterize the difference between wisdom and knowledge? And that usually leads to a really interesting discussion about, people trying to hash out what is the difference between these two things. This is not the kind of thing that people ordinarily think about. Philosophers are known for that. One of the things that philosophers do is we make things problematic that people just take for granted, right? We make things confusing, right? We are perplexed by things that other people take for granted. That's kind of the idea, and that's almost like a practice. It's something that we do habitually. So you probably use words like I know X, Y, and Z. I know that the Phillies are playing later. You probably use words like wisdom, right? So and so is wise. What philosophers will do is ask, what the hell does that even mean? We say these things. Do we actually understand what we're talking about? What is it that we're actually saying? And we try to pin these kinds of things down. So I really wish we could have that discussion, but we can't because this is an asynchronous class. You're welcome to do that as a part of your reflection assignment, though, is to think about the difference between wisdom and knowledge and what you think that the difference is. Again, this is not philosophy, though. It's not just about sharing your feelings, right? That's all fine and wonderful, or sharing your opinions about things. But the point of philosophy is to get people together who disagree with one another and discuss these things, right? So it's not just like you say what you have to say and I say what I have to say, and then we're just kind of wipe our hands of the entire thing and just like, oh, isn't that nice? And we go and continue to think what we've always thought. That's not how philosophy works. What we do is you get people together who may or may not disagree with one another, but frequently do disagree with one another, and we get them to talk about stuff like this. So you'll say what do you think knowledge is? And I'll say what I think, and then the other person will say, I don't think that's right. And I'll say, well, why? What's wrong with what I just said? And then they'll tell me what they think is wrong with it, and I'll be like, oh, I never thought about that before. I think you might be right about this, but I think you might be wrong about that. And the person will be like, why do you think I'm wrong? And then we'll go back and forth, and we try to hash out what the truth is. We try to figure out what is knowledge. We try to pin it down collectively. This is what philosophers do. As we get together, we discuss ideas, and we try to figure out what's true. So one of the things that I put in the syllabus, which is important, is that it's really, really important that people be able to speak what's on their mind, that they be able to feel free to express themselves. And the reason for that is not just because it's nice to be able to say what you think, but because we need people to be able to speak frankly and freely with one another, because that's how we figure out what's true. If people, if I say something, other people think that I'm wrong, but don't actually verbalize it, then that's like a problem, especially if what I think is wrong. We're going to talk more about that in the next video. If my beliefs are wrong and I'm acting on them, then I could be causing harm to myself and to other people. We're going to be talking more about this. But if you think that I'm wrong and you keep your mouth shut, then you're actually doing me harm by not critiquing what I'm saying. Because if you think that I'm wrong and you don't tell me that, and I am actually wrong, then I'm going to be harming myself and I'm harming other people, and you're harming me by not calling me out. Well, that's not the right way of putting it. By not critiquing me, by not challenging me, by not dialoguing with me. That's the best way of thinking about it, is dialogue, right? We try not to be assholes, right? Some of us are. I think I just am by nature. But anyway, but the idea is we need to be able to speak frankly with one another, especially when we think that other people are wrong. Because philosophers think that's actually a way of showing caring for another person, a way of even of showing love to another person, is by telling them that they're wrong when you think that they're wrong, if it's contextually appropriate to do so, right? If you're at a funeral and somebody's talking, the pastor is talking about, so and so is in the, with Jesus or in heaven or something, and you think that's wrong, might not be the right time to do it, but when it's appropriate, it's important for us to be able to challenge and to critique one another. Very, very important to philosophy. That's what we do. All right, so let me say a little bit about the distinction. I'm intentionally going to be kind of vague here. I'm not wanting to pin this down too resolutely because I want this to be a kind of an open discussion in your reflection assignment. So I don't want to, if you choose to do that, right? You have the ability to choose which ones you want to do. But this is a particular topic you might be interested in. You're welcome to do a different topic, even if you write one this week. But just to characterize a little bit, here's some of the things that students will often say. Students will often say things like, knowledge seems to have something to do with book smarts, whereas wisdom seems to have something to do with street smarts, right? Knowledge is the kind of thing that you can get from books. You can get it from other people. It has something to do with data or information, whereas wisdom seems to have something to do with application or living well. I once had a student say that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. Huh? I thought that was pretty funny. That was pretty good. But that captures this idea that there's knowledge has something more to do with just kind of atomistic, something you could glean from an encyclopedia, whereas wisdom has to do with being able to apply it, to being able to live, to live well. If you are having relationship problems, with your boyfriend or girlfriend, you want to talk to somebody not just who knows a lot, but somebody who's wise, right? Somebody who knows a lot may not be helpful at all, right? You go talk to somebody who just knows a shit ton about psychology or whatever. Oh, by the way, I swear a lot, so whatever. If that's an issue, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you about that. It's gonna happen. So anyway, if you are having relationship problems, and you just go to talk to somebody who knows a lot about psychology, they know a lot about Freud or something like this. If you go to them and say oh, Julie and I are having problems, and your friend who just knows a lot about Freud might say well, the root of all your relationship problems is that deep down you're just in love with your own mother. That is pretty much what Freud says, and you're like, yeah, great, thanks, Freud, appreciate that. It's not particularly helpful. You want to talk to somebody who's wise, right? Who not just knows a whole lot, but knows what to do with it. I like to say, too, that wisdom has a lot to do with, I think, being able to see things from multiple perspectives. This is one of the reasons why it's useful to talk to somebody who's wise, but also why it can be kind of frustrating to talk to somebody who's wise, right? So if you go to talk to somebody who's wise, if you're complaining about somebody, you might just, want them to take your side, right? But somebody who's wise will probably be able to look at the issue from multiple perspectives. It's almost like they're in a helicopter and they can move around the issue. If the issue is a block or a cube, they can move around it like they're in a helicopter and see it from a bunch of different angles. So they might say, I hear what you're saying, but if you thought about this, the person that you're having this issue with may actually be thinking about it from this other angle. You're like, damn it, I just want you to agree with me and complain about this person. But that's one of the cool things about being a person who's wise, is that you can actually see things from multiple perspectives. You can see things from multiple angles. I think that's actually kind of integral to what it means to be wise. So these two things they're not the same, right? And to be frank, you're like, I thought your name was Patrick. That is like the worst dad joke ever, by the way. And if you're not into dad jokes, you might want to drop this class because my humor is terrible, as you could probably already tell. But to be frank, I got into philosophy because I don't know. I guess I kind of thought it was like philo-episteme, not philosophy, philosophia. Like I got into it, I think, because I thought it was like the love of knowledge. Like I got into it because I thought the philosophy would like, give me a license to just like learn a ton of shit about everything, so I could be like a human encyclopedia and just like crush it at the bar on Quizzo nights. You know, I'm like, that growler is mine. Anyway, but it is the case that philosophy does actually kind of give you a license to just learn about everything. That's one of the weird things about philosophy is that it's like a meta discipline. Like, you know, you study biology, you study chemistry, you study history or whatever. Philosophy in some way kind of like sits above all of those things and tries to like synthesize all of the information that comes from these different sources. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is later in this video. But just briefly, historically, philosophy gave birth to a lot of these other disciplines. A lot of the other disciplines were originally part of philosophy, like psychology was originally part of philosophy, for example. And so philosophy now, one of the things that it does is it synthesizes things, right? It brings together all of the information, all of the things that the different disciplines are learning, and tries to put them into a coherent whole. So it is the case that philosophy does give you license to learn about anything, which is pretty cool. It's one of the things that I like about philosophy is I'll read, like, you know, I can spend time reading history, I can spend time reading sociology or psychology or physics, and that is not alien to the project of doing philosophy, because part of what it is to do philosophy, we're lovers of wisdom. Part of what that means is that we want to be able to make sense of the world so that we can live well in it, and that's what we're going to be talking a little bit more about here in a couple of seconds. But that's not the goal of philosophy is not to just learn a shit ton of stuff, right? It's not to make you really good Trivial Pursuit players. It's not so that you can, like, you know, win it at Quizzo nights at the bar. It's not so that you're a human encyclopedia, although that is, you know, what drew me to it, I think, initially. But philosophy has progressively started to, you know, beat that out of me. That's not the right way of putting it, but has started to encourage me in a different direction. That's not the point. The point of philosophy is not to learn a lot. The point of philosophy has more to do with wisdom, which is to say, the point of philosophy is not to learn a lot of information per se. The point of philosophy is to learn how to live well. That's what philosophy is about. It's about this application piece. It's about being able to live a good life. So when we talk about philosophy as a love of wisdom, it's really a pursuit or a seeking after the truth so that we can live a good life, right? So information is important, data is important, knowledge is important, but it's not what philosophy ultimately is about. Philosophy is ultimately about taking what we know, taking what is true, and then being able to craft that into living a good life. So philosophy, if you want to think about it, here's how I typically think about it. Philosophy is like a way of life in which we try to figure out what's true so that we can live well. Yeah, that's really what philosophy, that's at least like kind of like my summary of what philosophy really is in its nature, is that it's a pursuit of trying to figure out, it's a pursuit of the truth. So we try to figure out what's true. Let me rewind that, actually. Yeah, oh, this is terrible. I don't know how to edit these videos. But philosophy is a way of life. Let's start with that. Philosophy is a way of life in which we try to figure out what is true so that we can live well. Yeah, that's what philosophy is. It's a way of life in which we try to figure out what is true so that we can live well. Right? So it's kind of like a practice. This is something that I think is alien to a lot of us today, but it's a way of life. It's a way of kind of like moving through the world. It's supposed to shape how you interact with other people, how you interact with the environment, how you interact with ideas. It's supposed to shape all of these things. Philosophy really is a way of life. It's almost like in some ways similar to like a religion. In fact, when Christianity first came on the scene, when they're trying to articulate what Christianity is, they actually articulated it as one of the ways that they articulated what it was that it was like a philosophy. It was like a way of life. So there's a kind of similarity there. It's supposed to shape how you move through the world, how you think, how you behave, and that's what philosophy does. Philosophy is like that. So it's a way of life which focuses on trying to figure out what is true so that we can live well. That's the idea. All right. So the point of philosophy is wisdom, right? It's being able to live well. And then the idea is we need to be able to speak with one another to figure out what is true so that we can live well. So this is what philosophers spend most of their time doing, is dialoguing with people, especially with people who think differently than them, because they want to figure out what's true. Because what's true shapes how you live, right? At least it shapes how to live well, right? It can tell you how to live well. So that's what philosophy is trying to do. All right, so philosophy is not something you can be passive about, right? This is not the kind of class, right, where many of the classes you've taken probably are not like this, where it's like, you know, biology is not about trying to live well, physics is not about trying to live well, right? Sociology is not trying to about living well, education is not, right? These are businesses not. They have very specialized things, right? What philosophy does, though, is it really does try to completely shape your, like, how you think, how you behave. This is what philosophy really is about. And so this is not the kind of class that you can just kind of sit back and be passive about, right? You can be passive about knowledge, right? You can take a class on anatomy, and I can just tell you, you know, what are they doing in that? Talk about different parts of the body. That's what they do, right? Yeah, they tell you the bones and stuff like this, and you can just like whatever memorize it and then take the exam. But that's not really, philosophy is not doing that. Like, unfortunately, I do have to, like, you know, give you grades and stuff like that because the university requires that. So I have to like give you exams. But that's like in some sense an odd thing to do in philosophy because that's like regurgitation. That's knowledge. That's not right. And knowledge is important. Again, concepts are important. I'm going to teach you a lot of concepts. That's important, I think, actually, to living well. But that's not the goal, right? So if you're just going through the class and like memorizing ideas and just like, you know, like spilling that back out, regurgitating that on exams, and you know, and you're not really doing philosophy. You're doing more like intellectual history or something like that, or just learning about concepts. What philosophy is it requires that you be active, right? So what we're going to be doing in this class is we're going to be learning about other people's ideas, but in order to challenge ourselves, to challenge our assumptions, to see if our beliefs are true, right? Because we're all coming into this class already with beliefs and assumptions, right? You already, before you come to this class, you have ideas about what's true. You do. You have ideas about whether or not there's a God, whether or not there's an afterlife, whether or not human beings have immortal souls, whether morality is objective or relative. You have beliefs about all these kinds of things. And as I like to say, that means that you're a philosopher before you come into this class. You just don't know that you are. The point of this class is to try to get good at it, right? So you have to be active. You have to be willing to actually critique your own beliefs, right? That's what these reflection assignments are about, is actually trying to get you into the practice of doing philosophy. This is what we do all the time. Is like, I think that this is true, but why do I think that? I mean, I just even had a conversation a couple of days ago with some colleagues at different universities, and I was like, this, what you're saying really bugs me. Well, not what they were saying, what they were reporting to me. It was like, that really bugs me. And I was like, but why does it bug me? Like, why am I irritated by that? Why do I think that that's wrong? And so this process of self-critique, of self-examination, of looking at our beliefs and trying to figure out if they're true or not, that's not something you can do passively, right? So really, to do philosophy, you have to be engaged, and that's something you have to do. I can't make you do that, right? I can try to use your grade or whatever to force you to learn some concepts or something, but that doesn't mean that you're actually doing philosophy. Doing philosophy is something you're going to have to choose to do. You're going to have to say, you know what, I think that this is actually a worthwhile thing, to examine myself, to examine my beliefs about God, about other people, about my responsibilities to society, or whatever it is that we're talking about, whether or not we have free will. All of these kinds of things I think are important, and if you think they're important, I hope you do, then that's something you're going to have to choose to do yourself. You're going to have to undergo this process of examination, and I can help facilitate that, but I can't make you do that, right? So if you really want to do philosophy, it's something you have to choose to do, right? All right, so that's it for the first portion. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the academic discipline of philosophy. Cool? So before we move on to the academic discipline of philosophy and what that is, I actually want to address one last thing about the nature of philosophy and about what wisdom is. So one of the things that comes up a lot when I talk to students about the difference between knowledge and wisdom is that they will say that wisdom comes from experience. That is one of the most common things I hear people say. And since we were just talking about how philosophers like to challenge our beliefs and challenge our assumptions in order to figure out what is true, I'm going to challenge this assumption. So I think many of you probably have it. And if you're thinking about doing a reflection assignment on this topic, here you go. I'm going to try to challenge you on this. So many people, I think, take it for granted that wisdom comes from experience. And I actually don't think that's true. I really, sincerely don't think that that's true. I think that experience can be useful to becoming wise, but I do not think that experience alone makes people wise. All right. So why might that be? So I'll say it a couple of different ways. Here's just kind of like a quick tagline. So the reason why experience alone won't make you wise is that your experiences don't tell you what to learn from your experiences. That's it in a nutshell. Your experiences don't tell you what to learn from your experiences. What does that mean? Well, it means that, for example, you could have an experience and you could learn the wrong thing from it. When that happens, you don't become wise. This happens all the time. People have an experience and they will just learn the wrong lesson, right? So here's an example. A lot of my examples are about bad relationship issues. I'm just having a really tough time right here, guys. No, anyway, it's nothing to do with me personally. But for some reason, a lot of my examples are like this. So imagine that you're having trouble with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or no, imagine that you know somebody who's having trouble. Let's do it that way. So imagine that you know somebody who's having trouble with a boyfriend or girlfriend, and they come and talk to you, and you're aware of this person's relationship, and you're like, this person that they're dating is just like a total a-hole. Whatever, maybe you haven't said it to them, but your friend comes to you and they're all upset, and they're like, this person's breaking their heart and whatever, and they're gonna break up and blah blah blah, and so they're like, this horrible experience. This person's just like ripping their heart out, and throwing your friend's heart on the floor, like stomping on it, right? And so they come to you and they're all upset. And eventually they calm down as you discuss it, and they say, well, what I have learned from this experience is never to give my heart again to any man. And you're like, no, that's not the right lesson. The right lesson is to not give your heart to assholes. That's the right lesson. But people frequently learn the wrong thing from their experiences, right? I know lots of people who've literally had this kind of experience, where they will have an experience and then they will just totally learn the wrong lesson from it. Happens all the time. I do it. Everybody else does it. This is part of the reason why it's important to talk to other people, is because other people are more likely to be able to tell when this is happening than you are, right? So in any case, experience alone doesn't make you wise, because your experiences don't tell you what to learn from your experiences. For example, you can learn the wrong thing from your experiences, and therefore you can end up being worse off than you were before. Not only are you not wise, but you might be less wise, right? Additionally, you can have an experience and learn nothing from it. Again, this happens all the time. People have experiences and they just learn nothing from their experiences. Again, this is true of me too, right? I'm preaching as much to myself, talking as much to myself as I am to all of you. But I do think people uncritically think that if you have experiences, then it must make you wise. And that's just not true. A lot of people who've had lots of experiences aren't particularly wise, and some young people who have not had a lot of experiences are wise. Wisdom is a weird thing, but people frequently will have experiences and they will just learn nothing from it. So you may know somebody, again, who is just, has a tendency to date jerks, right? I know people like this. I know people who it seems like they just date the same person over and over again. I'm leaning in, between you and me. I know people who just date the same person over and over again. Not literally the same person, but they just date the same person with a different name. You know what I mean? They'll date Steve, and then they'll date John, and then they'll date Dave, but they're all variations of the same person. You know what I mean? And it's they just don't seem to get that this is the same person. They have a pattern. There's a pattern here, and they don't learn from these. Have one bad experience and then just continue to repeat, continue to rinse and repeat. Yeah. I don't know. Again, this is the kind of thing that people usually can tell more easily from the outside than the person themselves can tell, right? But it frequently happens that people will have an experience and they will just learn nothing from the experience. You may have heard the phrase, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's a terrible definition of insanity, but it's also, you kind of get the point though. It is, you get the idea that there's something bad about, something deficient about having experience and just learning nothing from it. But it happens all the time, right? So your experiences do not tell you what to learn from your experiences. So experience alone will not make you wise. So there you go. There's a little instance of what philosophy is like in this kind of, we're trying to, it's a way of life, trying to figure out what is true in order to live well. And if you have the belief that that experiences alone will make you wise, then you may just sit around passively and just wait for wisdom to come to you. guess what? It's not going to happen, right? You have to have discernment, and that's a difficult thing to acquire. I'm not exactly sure where it comes from. This is something that philosophers talk about, but I do think that part of it has to do with talking to other people who think differently than you, because they will give you different perspectives on things, and that itself will help you to be able to take multiple perspectives on things and be able to see things from different angles. And I think that that's at least a part of wisdom. So that's what philosophers do. We critique things that other people take for granted because we want to figure out how to live well. And if you have false beliefs, then you're not going to be doing that. You're not going to be living right? Because if you think that experience alone makes you wise, and that's false, then you're not going to become wise. So there you go. There's an instance of what we're doing, of what philosophers are about. So now let's talk about the academic discipline of philosophy. All right, so let's talk about the academic discipline of philosophy. We've already talked a little bit about what the word of philosophy is, love of wisdom. Commit that one to memory. I will be quizzing you on that. Definitely want you to know that. And then we talked a little bit about what the nature of philosophy is, and I tried to suggest that it's a way of life in which we try to figure out what is true in order to live well. Now let's talk a little bit about the discipline of philosophy. So this is a little bit different because philosophy has been around for thousands of years, really, as a way of life. People have been practicing this in ancient Greek, in India, in China. They've been practicing a discipline of philosophy in some variation or another. But the academic discipline of philosophy is only a couple hundred years old. In the past, people who've done philosophy, as we will be discussing throughout the semester, did different kinds of things. I mean, Descartes, for example, was trained in law, but then he became a soldier, and he's one of the most famous philosophers in the Western tradition. So philosophers have held different kinds of jobs. They did different kinds of things. It's only fairly recently that philosophers have become professionalized, so that you have people like professors of philosophy, like we do today. So what is it that the academic discipline of philosophy is about? So in order to do this, we're going to talk about the 5 branches of philosophy. So here again, it's a good place to have that study guide out in front of you. I'm not going to expect you, I don't think, to know every single branch of philosophy, but many of these terms are going to be absolutely pivotal through the rest of the course, so I want you to know them. If you were taking this in an in-person class, I will often tell you, the technical term, the term that I want you to know, and then tell you the definition, and then repeat it like 3 or 4 times so people can write it down. Since this is a video, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say it once, and then hopefully there's like a back arrow or something you can hit and just rewind it a couple, 10 seconds. I hope that's the case. If that's not the case, let me know. I don't know if there'll be anything to do about it at that point, though. The video already been done. Don't worry about it. I'll figure something out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the 5 branches of philosophy. 5 branches of philosophy. What is it that academic philosophers do? Typically, academic philosophers, what we do, our work can be categorized in one of 5 ways, and these are definitely overlapping with one another. They're not like completely separate, discrete subjects, but you can typically break down what philosophers do professionally into one of 5 categories, one of 5 branches. So let's start with what I'm going to call the first one, which is metaphysics. Again, study guide useful here because we'll have that term on there so you can spell it. But metaphysics. What is metaphysics? Metaphysics is a branch of philosophy which tries to develop criteria for determining what sorts of things are real. I'm like resisting the impulse to repeat that because I'm so used to doing this in person. So that is metaphysics. Metaphysics tries to address questions about what is real, tries to figure out what is real. And in particular, it asks and tries to answer questions like the following. Does God exist? Do human beings have immortal souls? Do human beings have free will? What the hell is up with time, right? What is time? Is that a real thing? What is time? Does the universe have a beginning or not? You might think of that as a question of physics, but it's actually a question of physics, a question of philosophy, right? Because if a physicist says, well, the universe began with a big bang, and philosophers are like, well, what happened before that? And of course, physicists will also answer this question, but philosophers can take this back just in terms of just ideas, right? Whereas physics always tries to ground things to empirical reality, to data, and philosophers are freer in that regard because we can just talk about ideas. So these kinds of questions: does God exist? Do human beings have immortal souls? Do we have free will? What happens to us after we die? Is time real? These kinds of things. What is the nature of time? All these kinds of questions are questions in metaphysics. It's the one that deals with these really kind of like very odd kinds of questions, I think. I do not do metaphysics professionally, but I find it fascinating. One thing you might notice is that many of these questions in metaphysics can be rephrased as, are they real questions? Maybe not all of them, but many of them can. So does God exist? Is God real? Do human beings have immortal souls? Are immortal souls real, right? So yeah, free will, is free will real? These kinds of questions. Is time real? A lot of these questions revolve around reality. What is ultimate reality? And that's what metaphysics studies. So we try to develop criteria for determining what sorts of things are real. So if you stop somebody on the street and you ask them, how do you know what kinds of things are real? I suspect, I could ask a sociologist because this would be their job, to have these kinds of conversations and to poll people and do surveys, but I kind of suspect just intuitively from interacting with people that if you were to stop somebody in the street and ask them, how do you determine what's real? I kind of suspect that most people would say something like, something is real if I can interact with it with my 5 senses. Like something is real if I can see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, or hear it. I think that's kind of what a lot of people would uncritically say. Again, what does philosophy do? We ask, well, is that accurate? Is that right? We ask questions about this. So that's what we're going to do here. Do you think that that's right? Do you think that something is real if and only if you can see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, or hear it? For one thing, a philosopher might ask, do we only have 5 senses? Like, why is that our criteria, right? Why is that our standard? It's a synonym for criteria here. Why is that our standard for determining what sorts of things are real, right? If I can see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, or hear it, why those 5? Like, maybe we have additional ways of telling if something is real. So I'm actually kind of curious. Can you think of a 6th sense? Do you see dead people? I don't know if people actually get that joke anymore. Oh, well, that doesn't matter. All my jokes are terrible anyway. Who am I trying to impress? Oh, wait, you. That's right. Oh, man. Anyway, rats. So can you think of a 6th sense? I think this is fun. This is a lot of fun. This is actually another good reflection topic is, can you think of a 6th sense? Remember, I'm not just asking your opinions. You have to defend yourself. Like, imagine somebody who disagrees with you and try to make a case that, whatever your idea is actually legit 6th sense. I think we actually have more than Actually, we probably have more than 6 too. But I was going to say, I think we actually have more than 5. I think the five senses is just something we tell kids because it's like nice and clean. So now you're in college, you can let the cat out of the bags. People actually have extrasensory perception. No, I'm not going to make that argument. But no, we do actually have more than the 5 senses. I think this is like pretty widely recognized at this point. Crap, I just forgot what it's called. Oh no, all right, there it is. You're gonna ask me how to spell this. Try to Google it later. Proprioception is one. Don't ask me to try to spell that. It's a difficult one to spell just orally. If I'm writing on board, maybe, I don't know. Proprioception. Try to sound it out. Put it